Anyway, so I think there was obviously the bigger part of this conversation that came out with Fred was, the clip, the teaser that Ahmed put out, which was about sort of him talking about how it was like, being asked about what do you think about the perception of you being selfish, right? And quite frankly, I didn't want to get into this conversation because it's already so toxic, especially online, which, this is obviously how this is going to be disseminated, where it's like you either firmly believe that he is selfish or you don't. But like there's just like literally daily arguments on this specific subject. So I didn't really want to play those clips. In fact, you actually had them in the rundown and I was like, no, dash all of these. Don't want to talk about this. Not entertain this conversation because we've had this conversation like 100 times. But the point is that I don't think it's going to change anyone's minds, even when you do hear from him. But I did want to address sort of the portion where he was talking about sort of how he handles criticism. And I think that's the other part where people sort of took it in a different way. It was like, no one can tell me anything, right? And that sort of sounds like he's not open to people looking at his mistakes. And I do think that everyone heard that portion of him saying that, like, listen, if you're just a random fan, like, he's probably not going to like hear that criticism or even sort of take it in because it's not as relevant to him. But I did want to play this clip, which actually didn't get nearly as much attention, at least sort of based on what I saw online.
I make mistakes. I play bad. I'm not a perfect player by any stretch. I'm nowhere near my full potential where I want to be. Like, I'm open to criticism. Nobody criticizes me harder than I am on myself. Nobody's harder on me than I am on myself. And that's another reason why I'm able to weather that, because it's like the stuff that they saying or people saying whatever is just like whatever, you know what I mean? I know I'm going to break down all of my misses and looking at everything, how I can be better, knowing the full scope of the situation. But yeah, it's funny. It's been a thing this year just because of the team's performance. You know what I'm saying?
So yeah, what do you think about it? Like, how do you think athletes should handle criticism, especially the sheer volume of it that they hear online?
Yeah, I think it was interesting, listening to the interview, and for Fred to, Fred, like he in the other part of the interview, he like listed out the people that he actually cares about, right? Like the opinions. Like he talked about how he only cares if it comes from his coaches during the game, like people that are close to him, or like players that he's played with before that he really respects. And I actually think that's a very healthy way to approach it, because like athletes just deal with a lot of noise. Like at the end of the day, you're only accountable to what your coaches expect of you, what your teammates expect of you. And honestly, you're only accountable to like the expectations that you set for yourself. I think, people, for a lot of fans, and this has been, like you mentioned, just a huge discussion all season. And I think anybody just looks at like the online discourse, or even looking like at like the YouTube comments anytime Fred is brought up, like you mentioned, the two sides are, fans are very entrenched in how they look at Fred. But at the end of the day, I think it just only matters how he's viewed in the locker room and how he's viewed by the coaches. Like, I think that's those are the only people, if they view him as being selfish, that truly matters. Because like at the end of the day, like they're all driving towards the same goal of winning. And if people in that locker room feel that way about Fred, then it's a different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you. I think the separation here too is like, I don't think what he was saying is everybody who has an opinion outside of people who are in basketball circles and his basketball circle is invalid, or that they can't have an opinion. It's more that like he doesn't necessarily need to accept that. And again, like we're talking about like on a person on that scale, we're talking about thousands of feedback on his game every single game. And by the way, one of those is just like us doing this, right? Or another media outlet doing or their opinion on the game or their review of the game. And there's all of that, and it goes into it. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't care about what we say either, right? And again, that's the part that you have to sort of separate between the two. Clearly, there is sort of a process of sort of reflecting on sort of how to improve on mistakes, as I would expect out of any professional athlete. But like, I think the key here is not that no one can have an opinion about Fred unless you played on that high level. It's more that like you need to take in what actually impacts your day to day and what impacts ultimately the result on the court.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that messaging does get lost, like you mentioned. When a player like Fred, who's been so polarizing with the fans, has a conversation like this, because fans are going to hear what they want to hear, right?
No, exactly. Like this legit is not going to change a single thing.
No. And you know what? I think what Fred's trying to say is the same thing too. Like he's not trying to change, you know, fans' opinions. Like, at the end of the day, if you parse through what he's trying to say, all he's saying is, like you mentioned, fans are entitled to have their opinions. Like, he's not trying to change their opinions. It's just he's not going to listen to the noise.